Welcome to episode 274 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. This is the new Pentax Eyepieces episode. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up the night sky, and this podcast is from anybody else who likes going out under the stars. So, Shane, there's some pretty big news coming here. We've got a couple new eyepieces coming out. Maybe I'll let you take it away here for a sec.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. I think with the pandemic, it slowed down some of the development from some of the big telescope companies out there. Not that you get new eyepieces like every month, but it seemed like once a year. There was a couple new eyepiece lines from various manufacturers, but there's been a bit of a dry spell. And Pentax just announced two new wider field eyepieces. I think they're 85 degrees, and we'll get into the details of those here in a little bit, but it is kind of exciting news that there's some new stuff on the horizon for us to check out.
Yeah. Should say this first of all, this podcast, and we are not sponsored by Ryko Pentax. Ryko owns Pentax. Like, we're not sitting here in our I don't know what, like our fancy race cars with Pentax on the side of it or anything like that. So but we do like Pentax eyepieces. Shane, agree?
We do.
Disagree?
Yeah. Well, we both have quite a few in our collections. Yeah. Interestingly, I don't think either one of us own the same eyepiece. Like you have most of the That's XWs. Right. I have the orthos and some Kellners, but We'll get into all of that too.
Ooh, I missed the Kellners. All right. And also kind of feel like, personally, I kind of feel like the Pentax eyepieces are a little bit understated in appearance. They're not flashy. And also, they're a little bit of an underdog. People tend to prefer a lot of other eyepieces. They'll go out and buy other eyepieces than Pentax first, which always kind of confuses me a little bit, because I kind of feel like the Pentax eyepieces really fit a nice balance between affordability and and they're among the highest quality eyepieces you can get, but they aren't among the most expensive eyepieces you can get. So I really feel like they're a pretty good bargain.
Well, and one thing I like about the XWs is they're sort of that blend of a wide enough field, but they also have the eye relief for eyeglass wearers. And, that might be part of the reason why they're sometimes overlooked, is if you don't wear eyeglasses and you don't need the eye relief, you certainly have a lot more options out there. The Naglers, there's a lot of Explore Scientific, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wide field eyepieces that are in that 10 to 15 millimeter eye relief range, which is not enough for you and me. But, again, if you don't wear glasses, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah. So the big news in the eyepiece world out of Tokyo, where Ryko has announced these new eyepieces. Well, let's just rewind 11 years, 1 month, and 2 weeks. So back on October 1st, 2011, Ryko acquired all shares of Pentax Imaging Corp. and renamed the new subsidiary Pentax Ryko Imaging Company Limited. Do you remember when that happened?
I do. Yeah, because there was concern that Ryko would not continue on with the XW line. In fact, there might even have been a bit of a spell there where they were of not in production, and then they came back.
That's true. Yeah. In particular, I think the 30 and the 40 were knocked out for quite a while, especially the 30. And I don't know whether they were just selling remaining stock of the smaller focal lengths or what was going on there. But eventually it seemed like they were all kind of dwindling.
Yeah. And from what I've read online, and I've never been able to do the comparison, but apparently there's really no difference at all between the original Pentax made eyepieces and then the Ryko made Pentax eyepieces. Apparently they're the same quality, whether it's optically or mechanically.
I have been able to make that comparison because I own both. And to my eye, it looked like there might have been some minor differences in the coating to my eye and in the samples that I have. So it looked like the original Pentax were a little bit bluer. Now mine are really old original Pentax XWs. I had like basically some of the first generation ones when they first released them. I bought several versions or several XWs, 3.5, 14, 20, and then eventually the 10 and the 7. I bought the 7 right before. and out of all the original ones, it looked like their coatings were a hair more blue. And then in the Ricoh, it looked like that it was just almost had a slightly amber tint to it. But who knows? That could just be my eye, and it's not like I did too much of a analysis there. And I got to say, seemed like the same high quality to me. Wow, they are good eyepieces, and I really like them. They are my favorites.
Yeah. Well, I still remember when I looked through your refractor for probably one of the first times, and you had the 40 millimeter Pentax in there. Just a beautiful eyepiece. It really throws up some outstanding views. Yeah,
that Pentax 40 millimeter XW is probably one of the best eyepieces I've ever looked through. For a variety of reasons, it's a little bit heavy. This is the only negative thing I will say about it. It's a little big and it's a little heavy. It's not the biggest and heaviest eyepiece. It's 24 ounces, but it is just big and heavy enough that my smaller telescopes, it kind of sends them out of balance. So I was using some other wide fields, and anyway, to make a long story short, I was trying to find an object this summer. I was using some other wide fields, and I decided that I was just going to go in and grab the 40. I felt like on this really good night, I should be able to see. I think I was looking for like NGC 253 and 288, and there was some other stuff really low down, like the Helix and such. And I went in and grabbed that eyepiece, and I'll tell you, it's just like a special eyepiece, because suddenly, from where I maybe kind of sort of thought I was seeing something, I was really indecisive over whether or not I was seeing things, to basically not just seeing the objects, but maybe like, really seeing some pretty good detail, or if it was like a globular, resolving stars, where before it was just a bit of a haze. So it is, I feel like they are really, really good eyepieces. So maybe we'll talk a bit about the like a brief history, or maybe a not so brief history, of all these Pentax lines. And Shane, you've got some of the SMC orthos, but heck, maybe we'll just start with those and talk a little bit about the Kellners too, but maybe I mix them up. Because I really don't have many of those, and I've only looked through the orthos a couple times. But maybe we should say this: in many of the Pentax lines, they have the letters SMC. Do you want to say what that stands for, or do you want me to?
Well, I think it's super multi-coated. Is that? Yeah. It's Pentax's coatings. Each manufacturer really has their own coatings that they apply. And the Pentax SMC coatings are quite renowned, whether it's photography, spotting scopes, or astronomy. They really transmit a lot of light and are top notch, really. Yeah.
Some people say there just might be a little bit of fairy dust in those coatings. All right.
yeah, for sure.
So the orthos, can you tell me, like, so you own some of the orthos and some of the Kellners. What focal lengths do you own? What don't you own? Give us your impressions of these SMC orthos.
Sure. So maybe before we even get into that, there's actually a couple different versions of the orthos and Kellners that Pentax made. So basically, there's the SMC branded ones, and then there's non-SMC. The non-SMCs, some of them came with like the J60, which is an old Pentax telescope. There's an interesting 20 millimeter Kellner that came with a Pentax spotting scope, and it has a 1.25-inch barrel, but you can unscrew that to reveal a 0.965-inch barrel, which is kind of cool. But I don't have a lot of experience with the non-SMC Pentax eyepieces. I have had, I'm trying to think which orthos. I think it was like the 6 millimeter ortho, maybe another one. I don't remember. But anyway, I didn't really use it a lot, and can't really comment on it. I do have that 20 millimeter Kellner that came with a spotting scope, but I've only used it a little bit with hydrogen alpha solar observing, and it's been pretty good. But where I've spent more of my time is with the SMC orthos. So of the orthos, I have the whole set ×2 for bino viewing. So that's the 5 millimeter. There's a 6, a 7, a 9, a 12, and an 18. And that's it for the orthos. Now,
I thought there was a 20 in there. I guess I made maybe the 20 is a Kellner or something.
Yeah, there might be a 20 millimeter Kellner. Like the only one that I'm aware of is the one that came with that spotting scope, but I
Hmm.
don't know everything either about these old Pentax eyepieces. Um, but anyway, yeah, the 5 through 18 line is fantastic. I haven't used the 5 and the 6 as much, but the remaining like the 7, 9, 12, 18 are fantastic. I use the 9, 12, and the 18 the most. I've used them in a variety of ways: solar observing, hydrogen alpha, and white light. Um, nighttime, on the moon, on dark sky stuff. It doesn't really matter. They're outstanding performers. I think they're a beautiful looking eyepiece, just
Hmm.
aesthetically.
They have like a
Um,
red orange stripe on them or something like that, I
yeah,
think I recall. Yeah.
yeah, they do. And what I really like about them too is the top of them is like rubber coated. So again, for us eyeglass wearers, you're not
Hmm.
going to scratch, well, less likely to scratch your eyeglasses on them. And they're all 0.965 inch, so they are all very small and very light.
So you need
So
an adapter for those to use in the modern kind of 1.25 inch
yeah,
telescopes. Yeah.
yeah, and those are fairly inexpensive, $15. Yeah, they work great, and with an ortho, you can have it in a 0.965 inch body, and it has the same field of view as an 1.25 inch ortho,
Yeah.
which is around that mid 40 degree range, like 42 to 45 ish is usually where they lay.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about the 965 inch eyepieces is they're just super light and super small. So like an
Yeah.
entire set of these things can literally fit in a pocket, like a shirt pocket if you
Yeah.
wanted. But they're fantastic. They're super sharp across the field. They have typical ortho eye relief, which is about, I can't remember, maybe 60 to 75% of the focal length. So
Mm.
like an 18 millimeter ortho, I think probably comes in around 14 millimeters of eye relief ish.
Yeah.
And ortho will have better eye relief than a Plossl, but
Yep.
not great eye relief overall.
Yeah.
So
So go ahead.
I was just going to get into the Kellners, but if
Yeah,
you have
go for
a
the
comment.
Kellners.
Okay. So in the Kellner range for the SMCs, there's a 25 millimeter, a 40, and a 60.
Okay.
The 60 is pretty much unobtainium. It's really hard to find that eyepiece.
Aren't they
And
big? Aren't they like pretty big honking eyepieces?
yeah,
They look big.
I've only seen photos of the 60, and it looks quite large. I think I've only seen that available once on auction, and I believe it went for over $1,000 Canadian, just due to the rarity. It's really collectors, I think, that are probably chasing that eyepiece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what I do have is the 25 SMC Kellner and the 40 millimeter SMC Kellner.
How do they work? Like what's their field? Are they 1.25? Like, and what's the eye relief like on them?
Yeah, so the 25 millimeter Kellner is a 0.965 inch barrel. So again, it needs the adapter.
Mm-hmm.
But it's easily the best Kellner I've ever looked through. And I have looked through quite a few Kellners actually. I have a number of Takahashi Kellners and a few other brands as well, Vixen and trying to think of, there's another one that I have. But anyway, the 25 Pentax SMC is outstanding. Eye relief on that would be not great. Like I don't believe I get the whole field with my glasses on. That is a big knock against Kellner's is the eye relief is quite tight.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a wonderful eyepiece, and I've really grown fond of Kellners when I started using these SMC Kellners. Now, the 40 millimeter is, in my mind, maybe the best of the whole series. It is outstanding, and it's a very unique eyepiece. The barrel on it is like 1.5 inch. It's very strange. I'm not sure what diagonal that would have connected to, but you can unscrew this 1.5 inch barrel, and you can put on an 1.25 inch or a 2 inch. If you have the right threaded nose pieces. Inch and a quarter, there's a little bit of light cut off, but the 40 millimeter Kellner roughly provides the same field of view as a 24 millimeter Panoptic, which is about the maximum field of view that you get in an inch and a quarter diagonal.
Mm-hmm.
The 40 millimeter Kellner will be a little bit smaller in field of view, but really not enough to notice. Eye relief is perfect for me with my eyeglasses. It is such a light eyepiece. It's wonderful. But where it really shines is just the sharpness, but the color rendition. Like I just seem to pick up star colors so much better with that eyepiece than a lot of others. So I really love it. I use it a ton. Now, I mentioned that I have bino pairs of these, but only the orthos. The two Kellners that I have, I just have individual eyepieces there. Both the 25 millimeter Kellner and the 40 millimeter Kellner are somewhat difficult to find. I see the 40 millimeter pop up more often for sale. The 25 seems to be quite rare. And I assume they're rare just because, and again, big assumption, but most astronomers hear Kellner and they run, thinking it's a bad eyepiece. So I just assume that, maybe people weren't buying the Kellners with that assumption and there's just not a lot out there. I'm not sure. But I can say that they are both fantastic eyepieces.
All right. Yeah, I'm just trying to find. I was just looking here, putting them in our notes. I can see that with the ortho, might be like a 3-element design. Looks like it has a doublet and then a singlet in there towards the field stop, perhaps. Then the Kellner is also like a 3-element design with a cemented set, like a convex and a concave fitting into each other, and then like a sort of a lens-shaped field lens or something like that.
Yeah, that's your standard kind of eyepiece construction. I'm not sure if Pentax followed that with the orthos or not, but I think the Kellners that is a pretty standard build.
Yeah, just looking here to see if I can find, because I'm going to talk about my my XPs next, unless you have something else to add with the. I did find it too. Something else to add with the orthos and the Kellners.
No, that's about it. Other than there are some, again, if you go non-SMC, there are some other focal lengths out there.
I saw them, yeah.
Yeah, like there's a 30 millimeter Pentax Kellner. I can't remember all of the other different focal lengths, but anyway, there's a lot of Pentax eyepieces out there, especially if you start looking for the vintage stuff. You can come across these occasionally, and they all seem to be really good performers.
Yeah, I'm just trying to put in all the different, because you can actually, the cool thing with Pentax is they publish their designs. So you can actually go on and look at all the different designs there. So when I was looking for some good planetary eyepieces, this is a long time ago, back in the early 2000s, I ended up picking up an XP 3.8 millimeter on the advice of Thomas Back, who's a famous optical designer from the States. Not sure if you've ever heard of that eyepiece, or did you look through? I think you've looked through mine.
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with the XPs. There's a 3.8, an 8. I want to say there's a 12 and a 25, but I'm not. I know for sure there's a 25, or is it a 24? Actually, I think it's a 24.
14 and a 24, I think, but I could be missing one. Sometimes it's hard to kind of piece things together, because when I bought this eyepiece not quite 20 years ago, but it was pretty vintage then, or at least it seemed like that to me. And the XPs are 0.965. So again, you need to get one of those adapters. They are tiny. I feel like I would never do this. I feel like I could probably swallow my 3.8X. It's like a large pill. It's like a cod liver oil pill. Basically, it's that small. And they're like 45-degree eyepieces, but they have very, very short eye relief. And these eyepieces are kind of strange. They're not necessarily like a low element eyepiece. The 3.8 has 2 singlets on either end, and then a cemented triplet in the middle. And so, it's a 5-element eyepiece, but it's not like a Plosseler. any other eyepiece I've ever looked through. The only eyepiece that I've looked through that more resembles these eyepieces than anything else I've ever seen is like the old Galilean eyepiece. It's like really strange, but these are called projection eyepieces, and I'm not exactly sure how they work, whether you're attaching a camera or whether it's just the design that makes them an eyepiece, projection eyepiece. However, they give this very, very good rendition of the planet. So a 3.8 millimeter is a very high power eyepiece. So in my, I guess like in my, 750 millimeter telescopes, it's really just a planetary only eyepiece. And the eye relief is ridiculously short. So I think it's less than 3 millimeters on my 3.8 millimeter eyepiece. They're long out of production. However, they must have made a ton of them, because if you want one of these old XPs, they're not, I mean, we see them go up for sale probably like every 2 or 3 months. Seems like there's a batch of them, like 2 or 3 people end up selling them for whatever reason.
Yeah, they seem to pop up quite frequently, particularly on the Japan auction sites like the Buy EE that we reference.
Yeah,
and they, so projection eyepieces like that are intentionally extremely short eye relief, and the way that they're intended to be used is to hold the camera just right onto the eyepiece. Now, with that super short eye relief, it allows you to position the camera fairly easy and then do focusing and take an image. Now they can be used for astronomy, but like you said, the eye relief is exceptionally short, and it applies to the whole line. I was interested in the 24 millimeter.
That's right.
So
it's that short in all of
them. yeah. So I acquired the 24 millimeter, and I couldn't believe how tight that eye relief was. And I think within 3 days I had it sold. It was just it was, especially for that focal length, it was extremely frustrating to use.
Oh yeah. The cool part about the design here, though, is this is the thing that really opened my eyes, no pun intended, to the benefits of some short eye relief eyepieces, is that often we equate short eye relief with difficulty in obtaining the image of whatever it is you're looking at. So often if the eyepiece has short eye relief and a small field of view and such, if you're trying to get a view of a planet, say for example like Jupiter or Mars or something, it's going to be really difficult, to actually get your eye positioned such that you can actually even see that object in the eyepiece. Because often with other eyepieces, it's going to be either on the edge and be degraded, or it's just going to be hard to line up the light cone with your eye. But for whatever reason, and how they designed the 3.8 millimeter anyway, it's actually very easy. Like I find, like when I'm coming in to look at whatever it is in the eyepiece, I find like even just like being 6 inches away, it's like I can see it like no problem. So if I'm tracking or something, oftentimes like I won't even worry about taking my glasses off or anything, and just making sure that my telescope is tracking really well, and I can almost like sit back and just take it in. Like I find like you can get a pretty good focus. Of course, that from where you are, you're going to have an extremely small field of view, but you can see the object quite well. So oftentimes I've used the 3.8 with my glasses on, simply because it's pretty easy to take in that object if I'm tracking, and certainly if I take my glasses off, it's no problem at all. Really surprised how easy it was to view through that eyepiece, even considering such short focal length.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's probably fairly comparable to like a 4 millimeter ortho in terms of eye relief, which to me, if you want like a high quality, high power eyepiece, then that's what you have to put up with. It's when you get into the longer focal lengths, I'd have a hard time using those XPs, just because I think there's better options that provide better or equal views, but better eye relief. Like for example, the SMC orthos, the 12 millimeter SMC ortho will be substantially more eye relief than a 14 millimeter XP. But
Yeah,
the
and I
the
suppose if
XPs
you
are
put
pretty.
that 12. Oh,
I was just going to say the XPs are pretty affordable. Like I think they
oh yeah,
go for between 100 and 200 Canadian dollars when they're up for auction,
yeah,
which for that quality I
something like
think is
that.
a bargain. So
It is. I really think it is. And the one thing, and we get emails like this quite frequently, Shane, as you know, about people trying to sort of look for maybe like, and I know you've got complete sets of these, and certainly not knocking that, but for me, I do quite a bit of planetary observing, but I've got the Pentax XWs. Those are my mostly used planetary observing eyepieces. But on the really good nights, I've got just two really good planetary eyepieces, and that's the XP 3.8 and the XO 5, which is really like a 5.19, and the XP is really a 3.79. So it gives me a fairly decent spread in optical powers through my refractors. So typically, one or the eye eyepiece is going to give me my best views there.
mm-hmm. And the XOs are some of the more interesting Pentax eyepieces to me. And I really wish they would have made more focal lengths of those ones because they are outstanding.
Yeah, those ones are a little bit confusing because it's kind of like they took all of the best attributes of the orthoscopic line and the XP line and put them in a 1.25 inch body. So you don't need to mess with the adapter. And again, because of that, you can use all your regular 1.25 inch planetary filters. And the design has a 44-degree field of view. So it's ortho-like, but I don't actually think they're an ortho of any real design. They've got two doublets up top that are cemented. And then I think they've got a singlet or two down below, though it's not clear in the little graphic that I pulled up from Cloudy Nights. But these have perhaps among the best reputation as planetary eyepieces. I don't think I'm misspeaking to say that.
For sure. Yeah, like the XO is often compared to the Zeiss Abbey 6mm, as well as the TMB Super Mono 5mm, in terms of the best possible eyepiece for contrast clarity at that focal length. And then the 2.5mm XO, similar thing. It's highly regarded. There's a Vixen HR 2.4mm, I think, that is in the same class, and there might be a Takahashi. What is it? The TOE eyepiece. I think there's something in that focal range as well that, if you're in that ultra high power, those three, are probably going to be fairly indistinguishable. With the latter two, the Takahashi and the Vixen giving you way more eye relief. But other than that, they're probably pretty similar in views. Yeah,
it's one of those eyepieces that I just keep in the case, and when the conditions are great, I just drop it in. And it was the main reason why it took me so long to get the 5mm XW, because considering that the majority of the observing I'm doing when I'm using a 5mm eyepiece is going to be on the planets, where having a planetary eyepiece just makes more sense. And I was really surprised how much I used the 5mm 5-element XO. I thought I would just use it once in a while. I thought because it would have this short eye relief, it wouldn't be that comfortable, but it was very comfortable. And it just provides like this very clear view. Maybe one thing to say about these sort of specialized planetary eyepieces and kind of what they present for people that haven't looked through them before is it's kind of like when you're looking at a planet under high power, and sometimes people say, geez, how can you use these high powers? Like sometimes I'll say, oh, I was using, I don't know, like 350 or something like that power in my 4-inch refractor. And people might say, well, geez, I can hardly get 200 power or something in that respect. But what the really top end optics and the top end SMC coatings do is they allow you to kind of get that extra bit of magnification. Really, they just allow you to take it a little bit further, easier. It's not like it's not like it's impossible with other eyepieces, but it's almost like they help to clean up the last bit of seeing or something like that, because everything that's coming through is not having like the bad seeing compounded, or any bad seeing that's there compounded. And it's been kind of surprising, like even my 3.5 millimeter XW, which I consider to be a planetary eyepiece, even though it's got 20 millimeters of eye relief and 7 or 8 elements or whatever it has. I can put that in a Barlow in my 4-inch tack and use that quite well. Of course, in tracking, and it's very high power, and you can get a pretty small field of view. But it's just a great experience. Sorry, somebody I don't know what they did, but there was a big bang outside. I got to start calling that stuff out more, because I was talking to my friend Dave, and I think, something happened in one of our recent episodes where we were talking about his new book on the Mi'kmaq moons that's come out. And I forget what happened. It might have been the episode where we lost the Zoom connection for a second. We had to resplice the episode. Mm-hmm. And I was like very distracted. There was another time where something else happened. It seemed like we've had a few of those weird technical hiccups in the past month. And one of those had happened, and he was like, yeah, it seemed like you were searching for words. Well, we record this live, folks, and we just kind of don't do much editing because it just sounds better and more natural, and we don't have the time to do that. So sometimes things occur. So whatever somebody just did, whether they, I don't know, blew up their barbecue in the backyard or something, there was a pretty big bang somewhere nearby. All right. Back to eyepieces. Let's go to the XFs now. Tell me about the XFs. I think I've looked through one of yours once, but I can't remember.
Yeah, so there's 2 XFs. There's a 8.5 millimeter and a 12 millimeter. And I think there's also an XF zoom eyepiece, but I really don't know anything about that other than I don't think it gets great reviews, but the XF fixed focal lengths have really good eye relief, 20 millimeters. But they're 60-degree field of view. So they're a little small, if you are into wide fields, which, you and I both enjoy that from time to time. But, if you're used to an ortho, these are huge. So I have the 8.5 millimeters. I have a bino pair that I use, and I think they're wonderful eyepieces. I've never looked through the 12, but the 12 does get a little bit of a bad rap online. Yeah. Some people complain about, I think it's like just the edge of field sharpness. I think it falls off on that one, depending on what kind of telescope you're using. So I don't think it handles fast focal lengths very well, which is kind of a hit on the, like the Pentax wider fields, like some of the XWs suffer from that too. But again, if you're using probably something in that f7 to 8 range and slower, I don't know if you really notice it then.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think there's like a zoom that's 6.5 to 19, and I think it varies on the field of view. I think it maxes out at 58 degrees and it goes down to 39 degrees. So it's sort of a strange beast. But yeah, thanks for kind of bringing up the elephant in the zoom. Because one of the things with these the next sort of round of Pentax eyepieces, so once we get out of the small field of view sort of planetary performers or Kellners or any of these, we get into these wider field of view, longer eye relief eyepieces. So these are eyepieces that have wide fields of view, and they're designed to be extremely comfortable for those of us who wear glasses, which is a huge benefit. Now, my understanding is none of these were originally designed necessarily for astronomical telescopes, originally, at least. They could be used in astronomy telescopes, but I think they were more like for spotting scopes. Want to correct me if I'm wrong there, Shane?
Yeah. So there's I'm no optician when it comes to eyepiece design, but I think like no matter what design you create or use, I should say, for wide fields, you have to accept a certain amount of aberration depending on which path you go down. And basically, if you're doing like daytime stuff, like spotting telescopes or whatever, you choose a particular design that yields a particular aberration. The Nikon navs and the Pentax XWs, and I even think your Docter go down that path.
That's right.
And then there's, if you're doing more nighttime stuff, you typically go down this other path, which yields a different aberration. And that's more like the Naglers and the Explore Scientifics and on and on and on. Now, not everybody sees this aberration, though, that's in the Nikons and the Pentaxes and all that. Because I've read a lot of, I don't know, not so great reports on the Nikon navs, but I think they're awesome. I love them. And your Pentax XWs, I really enjoyed the XWs. Although I will say when I tried the 14 and the 20 in my F5 Lightbridge, I did not like them. But, again, that's not the right use case necessarily for those eyepieces.
That's right. Yeah. And, I think you're hitting on an important point here. People should remember that some of these eyepieces are optimized for spotting scopes. And with that comes these aberrations. Now, it's inconsistent, though. So like you were saying, Shane, with the XF, the 8.5 is an awesome eyepiece. The 12 has less of a reputation. I haven't looked through the 8.5 or the 12, but maybe we'll move along and talk about the XLs, which I have a little bit of experience with.
Yeah, I used to have one as well.
Yeah, excellent. So the XLs came along, it must have been like the very late 90s or something like that. Am I misremembering?
That sounds probably right, I think. Yeah, right around that time frame.
Very late 90s. They came out with these 1.25-inch eyepieces in some interesting focal lengths: a 5.2 millimeter, a 7, a 10.5, a 14, a 21. These were all 65 degrees. Then they kind of had this strange beast of a 28 millimeter that was about 55 or so degrees. And it sort of maxed out a 1.25 eyepiece field of view. And these are now all out of production, except they've kept an 8-24 XL zoom. It's kind of a strange thing that they've kept this old zoom around, but has a fairly good reputation, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Anyway, so these are sort of off Broadway wide field eyepieces. So they're coming out in the late 90s. Well, in the late 90s, everybody who's a manufacturer is trying to make like the next Nagler, like a really wide field, 80-odd degree field of view eyepiece. The Naglers are out there, widely available, new and used, and they have 82-degree fields of view. And Nagler is coming out with smaller versions of those 82-degree wide field eyepieces. But one of the few downsides to the Nagler eyepieces at that time are that they were short on eye relief. Most of them had like around 12 millimeters of eye relief, which is just quite comfortable for people who don't wear glasses. But with glasses, you're not really going to be able to see the whole field of view. Is that a sort of fair assessment of the landscape there?
Yeah, absolutely. It is.
Yeah. Also, so imagine this, Pentax is coming out with these eyepieces that have almost 20 degrees smaller fields of view than the Nagler. Not only that, but they're huge. They're these great big eyepieces that kind of look like they have some rubber plumbing parts stuck on the end. I don't think they're unattractive, but they're definitely, going on their own path. They are not creating an eyepiece based on anything else that has been out there for a really semi-wide field eyepiece with a reasonable field of view. But they have these two tricks. And they are really, really good tricks. They have perfect eye relief for eyeglass wearers. They are like getting an eyeball massage, which I'm not making that up. That's other people's words, not mine. And when I heard that, I'm like, that's what it's like. One of the downsides to virtually all other eyepieces is that you get eye fatigue at the eyepiece. that's another thing people ask me. How can you be looking at Mars for an hour and a half? Like, holy cow, that's impossible. I couldn't imagine looking through a telescope for that long. Well, go get a Pentax eyepiece, stick it in your telescope, and ta-da, it's not me. It's nothing to do with Chris. It's to do with these eyepieces. And they just allow you to observe for a ridiculous amount of time because they're so bloody comfortable. Like, am I misspeaking here, Shane, or what's your experience been with them?
Yeah, they're certainly comfortable. Like, again, anything to me with around that 20 millimeters of eye relief is usually really nice. You know, that's my zone that just makes it easy to look through.
And they've got those super multi-coated coatings on there that we referenced earlier, which allow, it seems like every photon that hits the field lens in that eyepiece ends up coming out the exit field lens. Like, it just passes all the light through it. You get everything coming through there. It seems like if I have another eyepiece in and I'm seeing like some subtle detail, I put in a Pentax in and I get everything. Like, it's almost like magic. These are the XLs. And when I was really getting into upgrading my eyepieces from my Spears Wallers, which I think are a great entry-level eyepiece, you can still buy them today, assembled here in Canada. And I was out at our observing site, and a guy named Paul was there, and he had several of these XLs, and we'd been talking, and he said, like, what do you think of the Naglers? You know, because they were like pretty big deal, and still are. And I said, yeah, I like the field of view, but I have astigmatism in my eye, so I have to wear my eyeglasses when I observe. And he said, hey, I'm the same way. Come look through these eyepieces. And he didn't even say what they were. And in the dark, and had a really nice 12-inch telescope set up. And I think it was like f6. It's a pretty big scope. And I get up and look through that eyepiece, and I went, wow, I just had never had such a relaxed, enjoyable view through a scope ever. And I said, what are these? And he said, yeah, it's these Pentax XLs. And I think he had the whole set of them there, and proceeded to show me like some globulars and planetary nebulas and a few different things through them. And I was sold. I knew right then it was just like, it was one of those few times where you experience something, and they're not that expensive. And I'm like, these are what I got to get. And then Shane, I think you had a couple of these as well. So maybe I'll let you say your bit on the XLs before we move on to the XWs.
Yeah, I just had the 10.5 millimeter that I had for a couple of years, something like that. Yeah, it was a good eyepiece. It didn't blow me away. Like, I wasn't quite as excited maybe as you were about them, but I enjoyed it while I had it. I'm trying to think what I replaced it with. Can't remember now. It might have been when I moved to the Vixen LVWs, but my memory on that is a little soft. Good. So, yeah.
Well, for me, I think just because, like, I think maybe at the time, I don't know, but maybe you were somebody who wasn't always observing with your glasses on.
Oh no, always with my glasses. Okay. The only time I would take them off would be with the short eye relief stuff, like the orthos or the super monos.
Yeah, you seem to be able to get by. For me, I really struggle to get by. So I only have two eyepieces I can't use with my glasses. But I was really sold on them. And I just, right at that point, I just stopped buying eyepieces. And I give this advice out today to people. I was giving this advice out yesterday, last week, last month, last year, is I would say to somebody who's got astigmatism, just start saving your pennies and just buy one. Like, buy a focal length you can use with a Barlow or something like that. That's just my experience. So everybody's a little bit different. You can hear that just between Shane and I. But soon the XLs, for whatever reason, they were only made for, I don't know, maybe like 5 years or so. And in 2003, the XWs came out as like pretty much a full set. And the XLs by May of 2004 were sold out. I had actually intended to buy the XLs. I thought, for the sake of a 5 degree field of view, I would I'll just get the XLs, because the reviews were coming in saying they were basically identical. In fact, some people preferred the XLs over the XWs in the 5.2 and 10.5. But by the time I had my money saved up to start buying them, you couldn't even get the XLs. So let's go to the XLs. So the Pentax, XWs. The Pentax XWs, which I suppose stands for extra wide, came out in 3.5, 5, 7, 10, 14, 20, 30, and 40. And I currently own all but the 30, and the 30 and 40 are 2-inch sizes. The other ones are all 1.25. They retain that the heavy, odd shape to them. And we're 70-degree eyepieces, just adding an additional 5-degree field of view, which to me wasn't like a really big game changer. I think if I had to do it all over again, I might have just bought the XLs and been happy with them. But I think the first one I bought was actually the 3.5, because I think when they first came out, it was perhaps people were thinking that it wouldn't sell well or something like that. And so what I would do is from time to time, they would go on sale, and I just gradually have picked them all up except for the 30, as they've gone on sale. And recently last year bought the 5 finally to act as a partner to my 5.1X XO. So let's see. They have that strange body design. And again, going back to some distortion in the outer fields, people, not me, tend to notice this most in the 14, the 20, and the 30 in the current line. And in the XLs, they noticed it most in the 14, 21, and 28, I think, because kind of like you referenced, Shane, some of us really don't notice it, and I don't notice it. So that's why I eventually splurged on a Dr. 12.5 millimeter as well, because the distortion that is selected for the spotting scopes, eyepieces that can be used in regular telescopes, is something that to my eye is negligible compared to the problems that I have with other eyepieces and not using glasses. So if I use an eyepiece without my eyeglasses, it's just the view just doesn't look very good at all. And so by allowing me to use my glasses, even if there's some distortion, it is so minor compared to what I otherwise get. And for whatever reason, my eye seems to compensate for it. Maybe because I have a lot of distortion in my outer vision anyway. And so any kind of little bit of minimal distortion, my eye very, very easily compensates for it. And I think there must be a lot of people like that because they seem to be fairly popular.
Yeah, they definitely are popular.
So you've looked through a lot of my XWs. What you don't own any XWs though, I don't think.
No, I don't. The the wide fields that I have are I have the 31 and the 31 Nagler and the 41 Panoptic, and then I have a Leica Zoom that kind of covers the medium focal lengths, and then a 5mm Nikon Nav SW for the high power.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of rounds off my my wide field stuff.
Yeah, for the Pentax though, I mean, this is actually one of the main reasons why I want to get an observatory, because it's a lot of glass to haul with you in a case. And as you know, I keep them lined up and ready to go when I'm observing at my permanent site. And it would be nothing for me to have used the 3.5, 5, 7, 10, 20, and 40 or something like that, and or the 14 or the 20. Usually it's one or the other. I will literally sometimes use all of those eyepieces in an evening, and it's they just give such a great view. So I've been really, really happy with them, particularly because they have these wide field of views and they transmit so much light. So then I was sitting around the other night, or I guess it was in the afternoon, and you sent me a text.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you find out, Shane? This nice, I guess it was Thursday or Friday you saw it, but I think it was announced late on Thursday or something like that.
Yeah, I was just surfing through Cloudy Night forums, and in the eyepiece forum, there was a post about these new Pentax XW eyepieces, a 16.5mm and a 23mm. But what's interesting is they both have 85-degree field of views, so quite a bit larger than the 70, and still maintain the 20mm eye relief, which is pretty outstanding. And I think there's a lot of people that are excited. The release or the details indicate that these eyepieces are sharp to the edge, which again is maybe, if you were to find one con against some of the XWs, it's that they're not always sharp to the edge. This is something that I'm intrigued about because, my philosophy on any wide field eyepiece is if the edges are not, if it's not sharp to the edge, then I don't care about how wide the field of view is because it's not usable. So, if these are truly sharp to the edge and they provide 20 millimeters of eye relief, that's outstanding. Probably the old adage, I think, with eyepieces, like there's eye relief, there's wide fields, and then there's sharpness across the field. And it's always been pick any two of those three, but you can't have all three. And that's just the way it's been. Now, Teleview released their Apollo eyepiece 2 years ago, I think it was, and it basically delivered on all three. And now these new Pentaxes are really claiming the same thing. So I'm quite excited to hear about it. I certainly won't be the first one in line to purchase one, but I'll certainly be on the sidelines, anxiously waiting some reviews.
Yeah, and I think in 24 hours or something, there was like half a dozen pages on Cloudy Night Forum about this. But let me just slowly read through the press release, and we can maybe dissect it a bit. I'll read the first paragraph. So this is from Ryko Imaging Americas Corporation. And by the way, I did write Ryko and asked them if there's somebody we could talk to about this. We're talking about it first. Who knows if they'll even get back to me? I think I've written these giant manufacturers before. I never heard back, but maybe they'll surprise me. So this is from Ryko Imaging Americas Corporation. They say November 9th, 2022, but I don't think it peeled out until the 10th. Today announced 2 high-performance eyepieces for astronomical telescopes. So I'm just going to stop right there. So they're saying these eyepieces, unlike the other ones, are designed for astronomy telescopes. So right there, you can just full stop. That's big news.
Yeah, true.
That these ones are designed for us. They're designed for amateur astronomers. That's big news. That would be big if they said we just redesigned some of our old eyepieces for astronomical telescopes. But they're not. They're coming out and saying we've got these 2 new eyepieces, the new SMC Pentax XW 16.5 and SMC Pentax XW 23 deliver an apparent field of view of 85 degrees. Dissecting that a bit, they say the widest viewing angle in the XW series suitable for observing nebulae and star clusters. So this is really big news since they're saying these are astronomy eyepieces and this is what they're designed for looking for. I don't know about you, Shane, but I sure like looking at nebulas and star clusters.
yeah. I think that's pretty awesome. The 16 and a half, I think, is the one that intrigues me the most because, with that power and that field of view, I think it would be pretty amazing.
Yeah. And kind of like before, where they went from the XLs to the XWs, and the difference was kind of like 5 degrees. And I said, well, I said earlier, and this is true, I said earlier, I could have probably, sort of 6 and 1/2 a dozen the other. I really probably can't tell that much of a difference between 65 and 70. Well, let me tell you, I can tell the difference between a 70-degree eyepiece and an 85-degree eyepiece. This is quite a significant difference.
Huge difference. Yep.
Yeah. Now, their size looks like they're about the same as maybe the 30 or the 40. In fact, they're a couple ounces heavier. So I'll go on to read. The new eyepieces feature a new optical system with 7 elements and 5 groups that surpasses the performance of the conventional XW series to obtain sharp star images all the way to the edge of the field of view. So this is kind of mind-blowing that this company has done this. So typically, when manufacturers have built something that has maybe a shortcoming, and Shane and I discussed this extensively, this is just our own personal view, but this is not just our view. It seems to be pretty much across the amateur community where many of the wide fields in these longer focal lengths of the Pentax line, which are otherwise exceptional, have these minor distortions in the outer field of view, which I actually barely even can detect if I look for them. Some people will see them, this company has said, we're fixing this. They actually say it in this press release. This is kind of shocking in a way, almost.
Yeah, like I say, I'm encouraged, but you know, I want to hear about the performance of it from other astronomers, and you know,
and they
go
say,
from there.
Yeah, they say to obtain sharp images all the way to the edge of the field of view. And I mean, I think they can do it, because you look at something like the 3.5, the 5, the 7, the 10, my 40, like they can build eyepieces in a variety of focal lengths that are sharp to the edge of the field of view. No question. So they can do it. It's not like they're a company that can't do it or hasn't done it, or maybe they've come up with, you know, a funny design or something. They can do it. Like if Pentax is coming out saying they've done it, I have a high degree of faith that they've actually done this. Can't wait to see what this thing actually looks like. They say, like all XW eyepieces, the new additions incorporate multi-layer coatings for outstanding light transmission efficiency, advanced light shielding technology for improved image contrast, and weather resistance construction. They say, note, thought this was kind of funny. While the XW series features a weather-resistant structure of JIS Class 4, they cannot be used underwater.
Good to know.
Which I don't know if that's meant to sort of be a bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke, because I know that there are some other eyepiece manufacturers that will like take their eyepieces and dunk them or whatever, which is like, it's kind of a neat thing to know that your eyepiece could sustain that. But typically no astronomer is ever going to do this with like a $700 or $800 eyepiece or $300 eyepiece or whatever. This is not happening, but your eyepieces can get wet. And certainly my Pentax over, you know, I guess my oldest one might be getting close to 20 years. Certainly they've been wet many times. And by wet, I mean absolutely soaked, and never had a problem with them. Just to finish, they say the SMC Pentax XW 16.5 and SMC Pentax XW23 will be available in December 2022. They give their URL, which is www.us.ricoh-imaging.com, as well as at Ricoh Imaging authorized retail outlets for manufacturers. Suggested retail price of $479.95 for the SMC Pentax XW 16.5 and the $499.95 for the SMC Pentax XW23. So these come out sort of in like, you know, Nagler pricing territory, really. For 2-inch Naglers, I think roughly are about the same price.
Well, I think it's a fantastic price. If all of if everything that they're claiming to do comes through, I think it's a bargain. Again, the only eyepiece that I can think of that really delivers all of the statistics that this thing does is that Apollo 11 that Teleview released, and I know that was also a limited run, which contributed to the high price, but I think that was like $1,000 or right around there. It was pretty expensive. So if Pentax can deliver all of this for around $500, wow, you know, I think that'll become a very popular eyepiece in the hobby.
Now, we'll say this: there's two things that I'm really curious about. One of them I kind of can already answer, but the other one is a little bit of a question mark. So, like we were talking about before, everything is a compromise. If you want to go one way, something has to move. So in order to do this, it looks like they may have reduced the eye relief to a degree, because they say the eye relief of these is that standard 20 millimeters. However, in brackets, they put 12 millimeters, and it says eye relief. Figures in parentheses are the distance from the viewing rubber. So that's a little bit difficult to ascertain based on that comment whether or not these are going to be eyepieces you can use with glasses. And it may be one of those situations where some of us who use relatively thin prescriptions in small frames are able to use them with glasses on, whereas some people who have differently shaped faces and large glasses may not, because 12 millimeters might be close, but how close is that 12 to the lens? So typically when you talk about the quote unquote usable eye relief, you're going to give it like from the lens to where the focal point will be for that eyepiece. But this is a little bit ambiguous. So I'm guessing that it must be 8 millimeters between the surface of the lens and the edge of the rubber on the eyepiece, and then you got that other 12 millimeters, and then you got 8 plus 12 equals the 20. But that would be close for me. I will say that.
Yeah, that's getting kind of tight. So, again, that's why I'm very curious about the reviews once somebody gets their hands on these eyepieces, and we can hear about all of the performance details.
I'm very interested in both of these for a variety of reasons. Primarily, just excited to see Pentax actually producing new focal lengths of eyepieces. To me, that's just such great news.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly is to address some of the concerns that some people have had with the other eyepieces. Honestly, if these pan out, and if they do, if people say it's no problem using them with eyeglasses, I'll buy these eyepieces. Just like flat out. I'll pay the price, whatever it is. And get them in my stable, because I just think it would be really cool. And I won't sell any eyepieces. I'll just keep them. I don't tend to sell stuff as much. It's unbelievable though. I just bought that 22 millimeter Nagler.
Yeah, I know. That's funny.
So, but I would love to run the XW23 against that Nagler, but it might end up being a little bit redundant at that point, though the Nagler, I think, is a little bit lighter. And that's the other thing I wanted to touch base on, is that they are reasonably heavy. So they're 26.3 for the 16.5, 27.2 for the 23 millimeter. I think the 40 XW, which I referenced before, I find a bit heavy. And that eyepiece is like 24 point something. So these are a couple ounces heavier than that eyepiece. Not like really hugely heavy for eyepieces that are 2-inch and of this 85-degree field of view, but still that's fairly weighty though. For sure.
Yeah, that is heavy for sure.
All right. So what do you think about these, Shane? I know you're going to be watching close. I'm going to be watching close. Maybe we'll hear back from Rico. I don't know.
Yeah. Again, I'm interested for sure to hear about the performance, but more just from an interest sake. I don't foresee me buying these at any point in time. I'm not a huge fan of 2-inch eyepieces, and I know that goes probably against some of the common desires out there, but I don't use them a lot. It adds a lot of weight in terms of the diagonal and the eyepiece.
Yeah.
And then the other side of this is I'm just in love with bino viewing. So, it sort of rules out those eyepieces for me. But, depending on the reviews and what people are saying, I might get more interested. But it is exciting whenever there's a new eyepiece line out, particularly from a premium manufacturer that we appreciate. So yeah, I'm excited to see how it does.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited, because if the 23 panned out in my comic catcher, I would just get it would absolutely max out the opening on that telescope. So whereas with my Nagler 22 has a 31 point something millimeter opening for the light cone, this would be right around like that 35 millimeter to 37 millimeter that comic catcher has. So that would give me like the full 4 degrees instead of like 3.6 something that I currently have. Not a big deal, but it would just be cool. And again, I've been thinking about getting something in like the 16, 17 millimeter focal length for a long time, and sort of waffling on that. And this would put me over the edge on that. And I do like the 2 inches. I use my Doctor in 2-inch mode the majority of the time. And in some of my configurations, it doesn't have to use it in 1.25. And I always find that annoying. So I do prefer to have my eyepieces in that 2-inch format. I'm kind of set up for that. Everybody's different. If you're trying to do bino viewing like Shane is, then for sure, it's going to be difficult to optimize for both binoviewing and for 2-inch eyepieces. That's a real challenge. But I don't binoview, so to me, it's not that big a deal.
All good.
Anything else on this, the Pentax new XW edition?
No, I have nothing else to add.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We're close to 1,000 downloads per new episode now. So rate, review, and share our podcast to help us over the hump. And, I was looking this week, Shane, we were talking stuff about the podcast when we were getting going here today. And I couldn't figure out why sometimes we're say the number 2 podcast in Canada. Sometimes we're the number 13 podcast in Canada, but it has to do with the reviews. And so if people want to help other people to find our show, it's giving us positive reviews that will help other people to enjoy this amateur astronomy content as well. So if people can, please give us a review, and that'll help other people find us too. As always, send us your observing reports to actualastronomy@gmail.com.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.